Okay, Anthony, this is it's always been one of my more interesting, fun questions because of some of the answers I get, but more importantly, because of what's behind the answers that people give me. And when I speak, among other things, I usually talk about what I think was my first influencer was my grandfather, him, my grandmother, and my mom, my aunt from Kiev. They came to Montreal,
Mhm,
had an accent, and he used to take me for walks in the park in Montreal when I was 5 or 6. And one day I
mhm.
asked him, called him Zeta. I said, Zeta, how do you know all these people? He talked to everybody, which obviously I got that gene. But he said, well, one day I was just looking at this person. I smiled at him and he came over and smiled at me. And then we started talking. And while we were doing that, another person saw that and came over and smiled at us. So we talked to him too, and so on and so forth. And it just hit me, maybe right time, right place, that what a difference he made by that one smile that he gave to that
Mhm,
person. If he would have looked the other way, they wouldn't have talked, probably.
mhm,
And then you learn more as you get older how easy it is. It doesn't have to be complicated to be an influencer, and how um you are always influencing people ourselves, and it's our choice. And you said it before, in a way, to be positive or negative when we are influencing people, because it can make
mhm.
an impact. So with that said, can you share 2 to 3 people that have been influencers in your life?
I would love that, I would love that. So number 1, right off the top of my head, my mother. My mother was the one who was my champion throughout those difficult teenage years and into college. She was one who was always pushing me, Anthony, pursue education, pursue education, pursue education. Not necessarily as a career field. She just saw the lust that I had for learning, and she encouraged it. She just fanned those flames constantly. And she used to always ask me when I was in college, "Do you need money for books or anything?" Which is like the kindest thing a parent could ever say to a college student. And still to this day, she will text me every now and then say, "Anthony, do you need money for books or anything?" I'm actually getting a little emotional saying this.
It's good.
And it's a beautiful, beautiful sentiment. I say, "No, mom, thank you. I'm doing okay." But it's her way of kind of starting a conversation. So I think number one, my mom, she was
Cool.
the one who gave me that bite, that bug for learning. And then number two is my partner, Jessica. She has been the one through our entire relationship, 15 years now, who has helped me find my path in terms of my profession and in terms of just my life in general. And so every time there's been a big juncture in my professional career, I would go to her and I would say, "Oh, I don't know. I don't want to know. Do I do this or do this? Do I do this or do I do this?" And she says, "Anthony, you were made to do this." And I'm like, "Oh, I didn't even think of that." And then I have to go, and then I go down that road and every time she has nailed it. She just knows exactly the sorts of things that fill me with joy more than I even do. And so I have to give her credit for that. She's just got one of those. She's an incredibly wise person. So those would be two. The third one, um, I tell a lot of stories in my motivational speeches about my students. These stories are they're stories. They're stories about my experience with my relationships with my students, but each one of the students in the stories are more or less an amalgamation of a lot of different students together. None of these scenarios happen exactly as I tell the story. So if I could just mash them up into one
You
student
can. You
that
can.
has influenced me continuously throughout my career, and that includes, from the time I started teaching 15 years ago to today, that student I'm so grateful for because they've helped me rethink everything about what I do, how I do it, why I do it. And sometimes it can be really challenging, like that time that Katie came in and told me all the things I did wrong. And then sometimes it can be incredibly rewarding, like when a student, stops me in the street after 5 years after they graduate and say, "Anthony, I don't know if you remember me, but you did this presentation one time, and that changed the course of my career." And I'm like, "I do remember you. You used to sit in the third row on the right-hand side of the auditorium. I remember you very, very well."
um, well, how come you failed me on this? No, never mind. um, no, that's spectacular. Teachers are probably the ones that impact and influence people the most, and you don't know 90% of the impact that you've made on people. and maybe the students also don't know the impact they made on the teacher.
100%.
One of my favorite movies is Mr. Holland's Opus. If you've seen
Yeah,
that, have you?
I have. Yeah, it's been some
Uh,
time, but I remember with Richard Dreyfuss.
I cry every time, no matter how many times I see it. Right at the end.
It's a
Whether that's
beautiful,
a good
beautiful.
baseline, I don't know, because I cry at dog commercials too. So, but it's no, thanks for sharing that. And it's really wise that we can learn from each other and influence each other. It doesn't matter what the age is, or what anything like that. So yeah, super. Thanks for sharing all that.
Thank you.